Nice to meet you. Hi, Simone. Nice to meet you.
Welcome to the first team's presentation, with Division B of the preliminary round of 2017 Champions Trophy baseball. The team presenting now is Team Power. On the judging panel today we have Rob McDonald, CFO at Air New Zealand, David Love, Chief Operating Officer at BDO, Katie Jacobs, General Manager at Moet Hennessy New Zealand, and Fraser Scott, Chief Marketing and Operations Manager at Microsoft New Zealand. The team will have 10 minutes to make their presentation, followed immediately by 10 minutes of questions and answers. When you have 2 minutes remaining, I will hold up the 2-minute sign. Similarly, as you have 1 minute remaining, I will hold up the 1-minute sign. You will be cut off exactly at 10 minutes. Team Power, you may begin when you're ready.
Air New Zealand has a reputation, not just for being the best airline in New Zealand, but the entire world. Hello, my name is Connor, and I'm joined with my colleagues Amanda, Simone, and Matteo, and today we're going to discuss a few different strategies to help Air New Zealand remain at the forefront of the competitive landscape. When looking at a few of the things in the case, we found that the main goal of Air New Zealand was to keep at the front of the competitive landscape despite some of the changes that were coming in the future years. One of the things that we noted was that this past year, Air New Zealand was crowned as the best airline, not just in New Zealand, but the entire world. It also plans to invest $2.3 billion into the industry in the next few years, which is optimal because of the growth that is expected. Looking at some of the downsides, we found that oil prices are dropping, although they're on the climb, which may sound good for airlines. However, this has resulted in an increase in competition both nationally and internationally. And finally, low-cost carriers are a new form of competition that is just entering the market. Before looking into large strategies that Air New Zealand needs to accomplish, we first wanted to find what is the best place for them to grow on an international level. Mentioned in the case, we looked at the Asia-Pacific segment. The Asia-Pacific segment is expected to be 2/3 of the global travel growth in the next 20 years. And China alone accounts for 28% of travel just incoming to New Zealand. Keeping both of those facts in mind, we believe the first place to look in terms of investing and growing is in this Asia-Pacific market. Moving forward, we have developed 4 different strategies: customization, domestic discount plans, app improvements, and other digital marketing in order to accomplish the goal of growing and remaining competitive at the forefront of the airline landscape. Now I'm going to pass it off to Amanda to discuss our first part of the strategy.
The first threat that Air New Zealand faces in this highly competitive market is the introduction of low-cost carriers. Low-cost carriers cost 20 to 40% less than the average Air New Zealand flight. Now, Air New Zealand should not try to compete with these flights, as Air New Zealand is known for that customer experience, and these flights, on the other hand, are not. So the problem with the current package system that Air New Zealand takes is it seems to be competing directly with this through their Just Seat package. Now, furthermore than this, there are more packages available. However, it leaves out the middle market between these packages. At the end of the day, customers simply will not buy what they don't want. And with so many other options, customers are going to go to a different airline with a package that better suits their needs. So, how do you figure out what the customer wants? You can't think what different groups may want what, or you could simply just ask the customers themselves. By asking the customers, this will be the quickest, most accurate, and most easily implemented method of being able to structure the Air New Zealand strategy to appeal to the most demographics as possible with these customers. We decided to do this by introducing the new online Build Your Flight platform. As you can see here, returning customers who know their packages and know what they want will still be able to choose those packages that they know and love. However, new customers, or perhaps returning customers who want a little more luxury, or returning customers who want to spend a little less, will be able to build your own flight option. So through this, you will have the simple choosing your own seat, and now instead of packaging options, you will be able to choose which option specifically you want. Just because you want a larger seat on a flight may not mean that you want those in-between gate movies, as are currently all offered in one package. Each of these amenities will add a certain amount to your total expense, and all this together will make the new total expense so customers are just paying for what they want. So why increase customization? Through this, Air New Zealand will strengthen its current core competency of having an absolutely incredible customer experience. And secondly, Air New Zealand will have a very unique competitive advantage. Most airlines are indeed doing these package systems, and by straying away from that and instead increasing the power of the customer, allowing the customer to decide what they buy, more airline customers will choose Air New Zealand because they simply can get everything they need and everything they want from this airline. I will now pass it back to Connor.
So the next thing that we looked at is how Air New Zealand can ensure that they're getting both long-haul customers and these domestic shorter flights. As I mentioned before, there's a new form of competition in these lower-cost carriers. However, as listed here are 4 big advantages that Air New Zealand has moving forward. First of which is that only 2 airports are actually large enough for these long-haul flights. However, this is remedied by the fact that Air New Zealand has such an extensive network of different airports, which can be referenced on page 12 of the case. Also, there is expected a 4 to 6% increase in growth for the travel industry in New Zealand alone. And finally, as I mentioned before, Air New Zealand is planning to invest heavily in the infrastructure so that when it does become time for that growth to finally transfer to a huge number of people that the current infrastructure couldn't handle, they are ready, both for the long-haul and international flights and the domestic flights. This all needs to be translated into a concrete system that can be used to blow these LCCs out of the water, which is why we have developed a domestic discount program. This program, in effect, will help convert these long-haul customers to short domestic customers through a simple system. If a customer is flying in and has a 10-hour flight, then if they decide to take a domestic flight throughout New Zealand, they're going to get a discount depending on how many hours that flight is. As I mentioned before, due to the extensive network within New Zealand, this is perfect for transferring and utilizing the Air New Zealand network if a long-haul customer wants to explore some of the other parts. This discount system will incentivize these customers to stay with Air New Zealand for their entire trip and enjoy the full experience that New Zealand has to offer. Now, I'm going to pass it off to Simone to talk about the next part of our strategy.
So we saw a lot of opportunities with the current app in implementing some new improvements, as well as implementing a digital marketing campaign. As you can see, in the current application, customers are able to book their flights, they can order coffee from baristas at special Air New Zealand lounges, and they can receive updates on time changes of different flights they're taking, as well as gate changes. However, we did see some opportunity for improvements in these areas. The first thing that would need to be improved in the app is integrating this customization. Customers that are buying their airlines with this customization features on the website should be able to do the same thing in the application so that it has consistency. In addition, we'd like to implement a flight price check. When a customer downloads the application, they can select a few cities or regions that they're interested in traveling to. And when there are discounted flights to these areas, they'll get a notification. This will help increase customer loyalty as they will be the first one to hear about discounted deals in these areas. Additionally, we recommend implementing the option of having a downloadable itinerary and e-boarding pass to ease customer travel throughout the airport, as well as having the option to check air points through the application. Another technological consideration was free Wi-Fi on the planes, but we found this to be fiscally not feasible, as updating the service to accommodate that many devices would have an extensive cost that would then be pushed onto the passengers, and they would have a hard time competing with the LCC. The impact of this is increased customer loyalty as well as a greater incentive to download the app. Next, we suggest implementing a digital marketing campaign. The vast majority of flights are booked online, so going through an online platform is the most direct way to target these passengers. We want to do this through the viral videos, the safety videos that Air New Zealand already has. It's a great way to already utilize a platform that has a lot of viewers and to supplement it with mentions of these new offerings. In addition to this, we would like to use search engine optimization and ads with cookies through Google, Baidu, Facebook, and Weibo. The impact of this strategy is that it creates direct channels for these customers to click through the links and end up on the Air New Zealand flights to book their travel. Next is Mateo with the financial implications.
So quickly going over the cost drivers, these are the costs of the actual strategy and do not include the continued operating costs of the airline. The total cost of this strategy will come in at $53.2 million. There are two revenue drivers that are leading us to actually come out positive with this strategy. The first of which is increased load factor revenues, which will increase our revenues by $176.9 million, and the second being the New Zealand arrival revenue growth, which will increase revenues by $570 million. Together, these will increase our total revenues over the next 4 years by $747 million. The overall impact of this is that average revenue growth will be $187 million a year. That concludes our presentation. We'd love to answer any questions in the Q&A.
Thanks, President. Yes, no, I've got a question. You talk about, driving, passengers through innovation and product offering. So if you look at the data, the fastest growing part of the market in short haul is LCCs. So how, and that other fast growing business model, significantly people's own profit are in that for New Zealand. How did your strategy deal with fast growing segments at LCCs?
So that was really part of the Red Discount program. We're counting on people flying to New Zealand and wanting to explore within. And that's where the discounts come in. Depending on how far they come, they can have that opportunity to fly Air New Zealand again around the country. So because they've already flown with us to get into the country, we're hoping this discount program will incentivize them to move forward. It's because it's the smallest, the ticket prices is the smallest, it won't have a large overall impact on revenue. However, because they will be incentivized to have that discount to use Air New Zealand over and over again, even for these smaller flights, they will realize that there is a lot more beneficiality coming from this in the long term.
Yes, and through the program that Amanda mentioned, where you're able to actually choose the parts of the flight that you're interested in, obviously a lot of the people going on these LCCs want to pay the lowest cost possible, and what comes at a higher cost to airlines is having a low load factor. So these seats essentially can be filled up for relatively cheap because airlines have such high fixed costs and low variable costs, meaning that we can actually tend to these people towards the end of the booking cycle.
And the reason that we chose the customization approach to target the widest segment of the market is that if we were to go directly with just cheap flights to directly compete with the LCCs, it would sacrifice the integrity of Air New Zealand's core competency, which is that customer service. They were recently ranked the #1 airline because of their focus on the customer service segment, and in order to just focus on those cheap flights, it would sacrifice that core competency.
Just on the build your flights, how much thought and do you have a view about the cost of the complexity that you create in every flight?
Absolutely. So in terms of the customization costs that we're looking at for the Build Your Flight, there's quite a few that we're taking into consideration. The first of which is changing the website. The website obviously has to change in order to be able to accommodate this, which would come in at about $1 million. Then there's the logistical costs, which we definitely found to be the highest. The fact that you would have to create a system such that the waitresses, for example, would know what meal would be going towards which person and all of that, and we're putting about $5 million into the logistics costs. Then we have the database costs, which would go into actually having the database organized in such a way that you could keep all of this information rather than having the more simplified packages. And then finally, we have ongoing financial costs of just perfecting this system, since it is proprietary, of $400,000 a year from 2018 to 2020. And the last cost that we actually incorporated into this is just the opportunity cost that's going to come through having to do this picking your own things and actually not making people pay more for the things that they're not going to use. And overall, that comes in at $10.2 million.
At the beginning of the presentation, you kind of identified investing in the Asia Pacific region as a key driver. In terms of the recommendations you've had, how specifically did you think about the specific Asia Pacific consumers and how does what you presented in your recommendations address those specific
So
consumers?
the strategies that you looked at, they're all going to pertain to the Asian Pacific region, and the way that they're actually going to understand that these strategies exist is going to be through the marketing that Simone mentioned. So as you previously mentioned, we are going for Asia Pacific, so we're actually, the majority of the marketing costs are going towards websites such as Baidu and Weibo, because the Chinese market happens to be the one that's fastest growing at this time, and then through Google AdWords and Facebook, we'll actually be directly targeting the other Asian Pacific countries as well.
And the convenience of this as well is once you do hit that market and do find more customers through that, you can use these same strategies in other markets as well and just change up the marketing a little bit, as the Build Your Flight and other strategies will still appeal to other consumer segments. It's not exclusive.
In addition to this, Air New Zealand has recently invested in many new planes. So we do recommend targeting these new planes and new flights to this region because they can have a good footprint.
Just following on from that question, thinking of the Asian market, I think some of the New Zealand strengths that you've touched on in this presentation really talk to a Kiwi sensibility. Could you give me thoughts as to how we should address the Asian market in a different manner in a way that relates to that growing segment?
Yes, so through the customization, there is the option for them to have a more elegant experience. But in some research that we were doing before I read the case, the largest growing traveler market from this Asian region are actually called FITs, which stands for Free Independent Travelers. And those are travelers that often opt for lower cost flights so that they can spend more on tourism once they're in the country. So we do believe that by offering this customization model, Air New Zealand would be able to target those FIT travelers as well as those that prefer more luxury with their flights.
Just following up on the costs of your strategy, what thought have you given to the operational complexity of the costs? Logistics around food, ticketing, service, different kinds of service in a flight, different seats. What should be on the costs?
I'm sorry, are those operational costs in regards to the airline in general?
Yeah, so it's kind of following up on Rob's question around considering the costs of flexibility and innovation in a competitive low-cost environment. So you touched on some costs, but I was interested in your views on what some of the other operational costs would be for your strategy.
Yeah, of course. So in terms of those costs, those are the logistic costs that I previously mentioned that would come in at about $5 million. I don't know if you would like me to maybe break down more specifically what those costs are.
So for example, if there's 4 or 5 different types of ways of providing food or not, or baggage requirements, and the ticketing and the pricing around that, where's that in the cost?
Yeah, so again, as I previously mentioned, that would come in under the logistics costs of having to, again, have this, and as well as the database costs of having to organize all the information in such a way that you know who's getting how many bags checked, and that so that it can run in the database from when you check in to your airline to when you get out.
Statement, Air New Zealand is losing customers to LCC. Can you just point me to the evidence of that?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Point me to the evidence that you looked at to make that statement.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question.
Well, it says in the presentation, Air New Zealand is losing customers to LCC.
Okay.
And so what's the evidence that points?
So there was actually one page on the case that referenced a flight that Air New Zealand offered for around $242, and LCCs were only charging $99. And these are costs that we were assuming that Air New Zealand simply couldn't keep up with necessarily, which is why we believe that if they were continue to lowball these flights, there would be some loss of customers to this segment.
Additionally, these flights are some of the fastest growing types of flights in New Zealand, and for it to keep growing, unfortunately, other market in the market, other consumers are going to, by default, have to be taken away from what they were previously doing to now go on these different flights instead.
I'm just interested on the load factor where revenue increases and where you've got those drivers from. Is that just from what the market's doing, or is that coming as a result of the strategy?
That would be coming as a result of the strategy, yes, because otherwise the load factors have not been changing more or less over the last 5 years. So we're saying that through the strategy, you're going to be able to
And what,
experience
you're just interested to know what drove you to those percentages?
2.5,
Yeah.
1 and 2, okay, yes. So in regards to the domestic, where there's only a 0.5% increase, I said that because that's actually where they have the most dominance at this time, and they have pretty high load factors. And whereas in the Trans-Tasman, this is definitely the fastest growing region, which is why I said that they can have 2% load factor increase, because that's really where a lot of the new customers are going to be coming from, whereas the international or long haul flights, we actually had less of a focus on, so that's why we're expecting only increases of about 1% of the load factor.
Thank you.
Have you thought, there's a significant capacity in the global market that is alliances. How would your program and offering to customers